be busier than another person. If your main through line is you're just constantly busy and you don't have time for anything else in your life, is what gives life meaning, then you're not doing it right.
I've been around lots of people who are just busy, and it kind of goes to that noise signal conversation that you hear coaches and, different big business leaders talk about.
I'm in my 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. 70s is now young these days, and I have another 10, 20 years before I need to really worry about these things.
There are two groups, but the group with the 500,000 to a million, they're the most concerned about this.
We're talking about death, which makes everybody uncomfortable.
My job has been for a long time, 30 plus years, is helping rich people stay rich for the most part. And they're very, very clear on what they need to focus on, right?
Because if you don't decide who gets to make decisions for you,
that's a good way to word it,
then a judge is going to make that decision.
Florida's a really good place to age, isn't it? Because of some of our laws.
My primary concern is make sure that you, my client, have the highest quality life possible for the rest of your life.
If you could go back and give your younger self advice, what would it be? Welcome to today's PlanAssist Podcast, where we try to help people make better financial decisions over the long time. And through these podcasts, what we do is we share timeless principles and help people create a discipline using long-term strategies through conversations with different people in the industry touching the financial services world. So we'll interview CPAs and attorneys and small business people and kind of identify mindsets and habits that they use. So as we get into today, we'll kind of cover a whole variety of topics. And today I'm super excited to have Jason on the call with us. He is an attorney. It's Jason Neufeld. He's on the call with us, and we're going to have a conversation around elder law and law in general. So he's a Florida board certified elder law attorney. He works with families around navigating Medicare planning, which is something that comes up a lot, estate planning, probate, kind of long-term care decisions, which I hear constantly as a financial advisor. And then kind of just how do you put structure and clarity around that? So he has offices throughout Florida. He's primarily in South Florida, but can absolutely service Florida with Zooms, with meetings, etc. So with that, did I miss anything that you wanted to add?
You're hired, man. That's a great summary. Thank you.
Good. Okay, so as I kind of mentioned, Jason, you and I talked a little bit offline, is that these conversations are just conversations around how do we help people kind of create a structured and discipline in kind of making financial decisions across the board. So not just simply buying and selling an investment, but kind of because we know that if you're going to build wealth and create wealth, you kind of got to build it around the kind of what I call first principles, kind of using Elon Musk's word, is it's have, kind of liquidity, safety, and growth, but built inside there is all the structures, the right accounts, the how do you title stuff, et cetera. And that's the kind of stuff we're going to talk about. Sure. And then before I kind of kick it off, what I thought on all my calls, I start them always off with the same question. And that is, if you could go back and give your younger self advice, what would it be?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think if it was, there are a few things I can think of, but I think what kind of popped into my mind when you asked that question initially was when I was younger, I think I spent a lot of time being busy and confusing that with doing something valuable. And I feel like I remember being in my mid-20s, out of law school, going to networking events and trying to, build a brand and bring in business. And so a couple of things. The first is there was this culture of be busier than another person. In other words, you almost like over drinks, you go, oh, I hardly slept because all I was doing was working, and all I do is work, and I can't go out that much on the weekends because I'm just so busy. So there's this culture of like being proud of how busy you are. And I think that also dovetails nicely to, even when you're not the boss, even when you're not building your own business, if you're just doing grunt work all the time, you're also not necessarily growing. So being busy is not the same as being productive or doing something valuable. And now when I hear people talk about if they're constantly, listen, we're all going to, I think the natural cycle of the way life works is we're going to go through cycles naturally where you'll be busier than at other point in times. You can't avoid being busy all the time, but if your main through line is you are just constantly busy and you don't have time for anything else in your life that's what gives life meaning, then you're not doing it right and you're inefficient. What you're saying when you're being that busy is not necessarily a moniker, not necessarily a badge of how much money you're making or how important you are. It's how efficient you are. When I hear people say how busy they are all the time with no reprieve, it's you got to figure your life out, man.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not delegating properly. You're not focusing on the highest and best use of your time. So that's what I would say is don't confuse being busy with doing something valuable.
That is a really good way to start this conversation. I cannot agree with you more as someone who have been around lots of people who are just busy. And it kind of goes to that noise signal conversation that you hear coaches and, different big business leaders talk about. It's not just, you gotta make more than noise. You got to actually create signals that create activity. So at the end of the day, what happened and what's the value that you added to people's lives? And I'm a financial advisor and I tell people all the time, my job has been for a long time, 30 plus years, is helping rich people stay rich for the most part. And one of the things that I find almost uniformly across them is they're very, very clear on what they need to focus on, right? They have kind of a model, they have a plan. Almost every single one of them has, and I'm not talking some 48-page PDF document. I'm saying they know where they are, they know where they need to go.
You have your goals and you know how to separate what's not contributing to achieving that goal and to say no to those things or give somebody else those things to do.
Exactly. That's right.
For sure. I agree.
So getting into it as someone who sat down with hundreds of clients over the years, helping people with the estate planning part of it, which is where you're an expert and specialize in, is probably one of my biggest challenges as a financial advisor. And I'll bet you all your other financial advisors you talk to, because we're obviously not attorneys. So our job is to help people do planning, right? I tell people all the time, have a strategy, have a plan. That doesn't mean you have to. It doesn't mean you don't change it, but you kind of know, well, part of that plan will always include estate planning and some basic stuff. What are some of before I even get into it, I'll kind of set this call up for you, or set this question up.
Sure.
I just find people are so hesitant to even move forward, even though they need to do it. They just, I'll have a quarterly review. Did you get your wills or trusts updated? And the answer, I know I need to do it, but no. And I find that the more drama they have in their lives actually means the more important it is, but it also is less likely to do them. They'll put it off. If it's a second marriage, kids from multiple marriages, that's the group that actually needs it the most, but that's the group so just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think you are 100% correct when we talk about. We do a few different things. We do estate planning, we do Medicaid planning. We'll get into all these things and why they're important.
Exactly.
But on the estate planning side, we're bringing up some heavy subjects that are uncomfortable to talk about. We're talking about death, which makes everybody uncomfortable. We're talking about what happens if you become incapacitated, which is going to make people comfortable. And we're talking about what do you want the end of your life to look like if you are you have some sort of terminal condition, if you're alive because you're only hooked up to machines, what do you want to happen? These are really uncomfortable things. So it's more convenient, it's more comfortable to stick your head in the sand and say, I'm in my 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. 70s is now young these days. And I have another 10, 20 years before I need to really worry about these things. And the problem is that the world doesn't go according to plan. And so I have to force people to think about these uncomfortable situations and say, listen, you don't want to be caught flat-footed. You want to, make sure that you have empowered the right people to make decisions for you. If you get to the point where there's gradually or suddenly, because it's some, God forbid, a stroke, a health event, a heart attack, right? Sometimes it's a precipitous drop. Sometimes it's a gradual drop. And we don't know. None of us have that crystal ball. So listen, don't think of it as giving power away. Don't think of it as, you're not making something happen that's not already going to happen, right? So let's think of it as a very empowering tool. Because if you don't decide who gets to make decisions for you,
That's a good way to word it.
then a judge is going to make that decision.
Yep.
Okay. It either can be you or it can be a stranger wearing a black robe who makes the decision. And then, God forbid, you pass away without any kind of document, then the state has a prescription. There is people who don't plan. There are lots of people. If you don't plan, you're in good company.
And it's 50%, right?
Yeah,
I mean, all the numbers I see, it's in that 50% range.
Yeah, and so the state has recognized that. Listen, we have to figure something out. So they have an order of priority as to who gets your stuff after you pass away. And then some people will just do the bare minimum and they'll go, well, I have a will. And the will is like, a very fancy looking piece of paper. And it can be lengthy at times and it's notarized and it's got 2 witnesses. And they go, this is great. They go, well, if you're relying on a will, then you're still going to court. I go, the will is just what you're giving the judge instructions. So that's when we start talking about, maybe we want to talk about a trust, because this is how we're going to efficiently get assets to the next generation or the charity of your choice or wherever it is you want the money to go. So I try to have people think of it as these are very empowering documents. You get to set the rules while you have the ability to set the rules. So let's put those in writing so we don't have to rely on the stranger in the black robe. That's what I try to get across to my clients.
And the other thing that I think is fascinating when I have these conversations, again, I kind of have a line I can't go over, but but when I talk to them about even something as simple as a will, I'm like, you realize that, okay, so you don't have a will and they'll figure it out because you'll be dead. I said, probably the most important documents in a will are the documents that come for the most part for no cost, and that's the power of attorney, right? So the financial power of attorney and the healthcare power of attorney. I said, you have to understand something. You've been married to your wife for 50 years.
Right.
She has no decision on your medical decisions if you don't have a medical power of attorney when you're sitting in the hospital and incapacitated.
Well, there is something called a healthcare proxy, which is, again, sort of the state's prescription, but you're just giving your family hurdles to jump over.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think you want to make everyone's life easier. And I think you brought up a phenomenal point, which is a lot of people, when they come to me for an estate planning consultation, they're, of course, very concerned about who gets their stuff after they pass away. And I'd like to point out that's important, but it's my secondary concern. My primary concern is make sure that you, my client, have the highest quality life possible for the rest of your life. And then we want to make sure things get wherever they're supposed to go efficiently. But how do we make sure you have the highest possible quality of life? You have to empower the people who you believe are going to make those important decisions for you in the way you would have wanted. And that precisely correct. We call it an enhanced durable power of attorney. That is the most of all the fancy trusts and all the complicated planning that I sometimes do. There's nothing more important than a well-drafted, durable power of attorney, because a lot of people, even when they don't see a lawyer, they go, well, this is a free form I can download off the internet. And that's true. There's plenty of free forms you can download off the internet. And what happens is people have these documents and they're walking around with a very false sense of security, because even these free forms, for the most part, they'll be fine for very basic things like going to the bank. And what happens is that the issue is we're no longer, in Florida, we're no longer allowed to have these very generic, like you can't just say, I give my agent, Tim Clifford, the ability to do everything for me, so help me God. You used to be able to do that. You used to be able to have these very generic forms. And these are the ones that I see circulating online. But the law changed back in 2011, if you can believe it, and I still see these forms are prevalent, where after 2011, the law changed so that now the powers you give your agent under a power of attorney have to be very specific. And you can't use this broad language. And if it's not there, they can't do it. Not only that, there are certain powers where if they're not initialed properly, it can be highlighted and bolded all you want, all caps, they still can't do it. So and again, it's not just I give my ability to do everything, so help me God. It's these very specific things. So now the issue comes up in the asset protection world when people come to me because they go, I'm burning through money and I need help paying for, my loved one needs help paying for care at home or care in a facility. And they go, don't worry, I have a power of attorney, a very strong power of attorney. And I actually, when I get to reading it, I go, there's these free forms I see circulating online. I go, I know this form in a second. Or they got it from like their, I don't know, their divorce lawyer, someone who's not thinking about the things I'm thinking about. And what happens, they come to me with these documents and I'm hamstrung and I go, I can't do everything that I need to do to protect your assets to get help paying for care at home or care in a facility. And now we're back to going to the stranger in the black robe to try to get a guardianship to empower my clients to do the things that because they don't have the mind anymore, the capacity to sign documents. So power of attorney seems so simple. It needs thought. It needs discussion. And that discussion, if it's not with me, which I'm okay with, it's got to be with an experienced estate planning or elder law attorney, because we're thinking about things that your generic personal injury lawyer or family law attorney, I'm not those guys are good at what they do, but they're not estate planning lawyers and they're not elder law attorneys. They're sometimes these lawyers get into the business of, I want to be helpful, I want to earn a couple extra bucks because this is just a form document. What I'm trying to get across is it's not a form document. We have to really think about what you want to empower people to do, because if it's not in there or if it's not signed or initialed properly, then it's a useless document or near useless document.
That's probably the best explanation that I've heard of the power of attorney. I mean, you did a really nice job summarizing and kind of what it is. And one of the things that I did about 5 years ago was I was like, I need to put something together, not for the general public, but for my clients. I wanted to put something together that, because I'm only meeting with them for an hour, right? So, I mean, I don't get to spend a bunch of time. So I thought, well, I'm going to put something together that's 30,000 feet. It doesn't go into, specific details, but I wanted to say, okay, what is it that we have to really hyper focus on, and where are we going over a decade, not over this particular meeting? And I came up with 3 core principles: have a plan, be diversified, seek counsel. Okay. So those are the 3 that I kind of came up with. And then I built kind of processes around them, but still really short. I mean, you can get the book for free on my website, but it's not like, oh, Tim, you're really smart. All I did was take what kind of principles have used for years and decades that wealthy people use, and that kind of, the first 2 are relatively easy, but we're talking about kind of have a plan. But have a plan is really important because you got to kind of write it down. The diversification kind of says what, for itself. But the third one is the hardest one that people mess with, is that people who have wealth, they're really good at seeking counsel and expertise, right? It goes to your point about, I'm like, you can't be going to your GP for kidney stones.
Correct.
Okay. You need to go to a urologist, right? I mean, the same thing happens with the attorneys. Same thing happens with financial services. And I don't try to pretend that I'm an expert in stuff. I try to be the quarterback, right? It's kind of the team of experts. How do we kind of put this together and really help people kind of get through it? And I really believe the next 5 years are going to be kind of the time experts shine. It's the best. I don't know how else to. It's going to become very clear that you think you're smart enough to do something, but you better go get an expert to go do whatever you're looking for. And what you just said is so important.
I think especially with AI, I think people are going to, AI is going to be both helpful and hurtful, because people are going to go, ChatGPT, draft me a good power of attorney, and ChatGPT is going to go, okay, here are all the forms that I have access to online. It's going to aggregate something, and it's going to look really good, and it's either going to be helpful or it's not. And no one, if you don't get the advice of an experienced lawyer, you're not really going to know until it's too late.
Well, exactly. Like most of the stuff, like meeting with you and even myself, where I'm not very good with people who have kind of not accumulated wealth. I'm not the advisor to sit down with someone. So I'm not a Dave Ramsey financial advisor, right? I am kind of once someone's created the wealth. The same thing's true with you. They got to kind of do it up front, because once you actually need you or I, it's probably too late.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're probably not.
Well, we want to get them while they have their mind. As long as you have your mind. Some people also make the mistake. They go, we have, the classic example, someone with a Parkinson's diagnosis, and they go, well, I can't sign because my hand's too shaky. And I go, I don't care about that. That's okay. I've worked with people who have no arms, right? I mean, as long as you have, it's not whether you can physically do it, it's can you cognitively understand the concepts? Can you understand what a power of attorney is? Not that you have to read through the legal minutia and understand it the way a lawyer understands it, but the concept. You're giving someone else the ability to deal with your money, to deal with your real estate, to deal with the government, to deal with a lawyer. Can they understand that? As long as they can catch them before the answer to that question is no, then we can help them.
And
The other,
Florida, and people
Mhm,
need to understand,
mhm,
Florida is very specific and
yeah,
very strict about it
yeah,
because I can literally tell you a personal experience. When my
hmm
mother moved down here from Indiana,
yeah,
she had her trusts and her wills were all set up. Her power
yeah,
of attorney and her healthcare power of attorney all had Indiana. So I needed to update them
right,
here in Florida. Now she
right,
was 83. She still
right,
had her mind, but she was older, right? I mean,
yes,
and there's 5 kids in my family. So I'm one of 5, but I'm the financial advisor. So of
yeah,
course I'm the one that kind of ends up stepping in, but it
sure,
caused some stress, right? It's like, well, Tim, you're in control. What are you doing? And da da da.
yeah,
Anyways, I went to an estate planning attorney, just like you're talking about, over in
mm-hmm,
Claremont.
mm-hmm,
And it was so interesting, Jason, because I was actually taken back because I took mom in,
mm-hmm,
and again, I'm a financial advisor, so I'm like, I'm going to kind of take over. He kind of takes us through and says, okay, here's what we need to do, and he says, okay, now, and so I think we're going to just go through the process and do it. He goes, we have to reschedule this meeting, and your mom has to come to see me by herself.
mm-hmm,
You can't be. And I said, okay, well, then I'll bring her back. He goes, no, no,
uh-huh,
no. He
uh-huh,
says, he says, no, you can't be part of the process. I need to
uh-huh,
know that your mother, because
yeah,
again, he didn't know her. So I'm like this new relationship,
yeah,
and he
yep,
knew we were having some stress in
yes,
kind of the family. He goes, no, he goes, Tim, he goes, I can't do that. He goes, we need to know that your mom is capable of understanding what I'm saying and what I'm doing, and that she can sign it. And I said, it gets so specific. It got
yeah,
so, I said, well, then, she's not a very good driver. And he goes, that's fine. I'll go to her
uh-huh,
place, but
uh-huh,
we need to separate this
yeah.
conversation from you.
Well, what's important is always to make what we're always thinking about when, oftentimes, my firm's called Elder Needs Law. I
Right.
mostly deal with people who are in their, mid
80s.
70s, mid 70s and later. But listen, I work with a lot of young families too. And after my talk with you, I got a consultation with a young family that just wants to do regular estate planning. But my focus is certainly on senior citizens and disabled individuals and things like that. But the point is, it's often the case that my client would just not be able to get to me without the assistance of somebody else. So here's what the Florida bar rules care about. They care about that if Tim brings his mother to the consultation, and maybe Tim has found the attorney because mom or dad in their 80s or 90s are not necessarily going online figuring out who the best elder law attorney is,
Which
right?
was the case in
Yeah,
this.
yeah, and which is very common. So now what we're wary of is Tim, even though Tim looks so nice and Tim seems like a great guy, but we still always have to be aware of is Tim influencing mom in some nefarious manner. So what your lawyer did was appropriate. I don't always take it that far. In other words, I'm okay because the Florida bar rules are very clear that people are allowed to request the assistance of a loved one to make them feel more comfortable and even participate in the meeting. So I wouldn't have like force you to go home and have mom take an Uber or have me go to her.
But I want to just to kind
Yeah,
of the point I'll just add to this is again, kind of context matters. There was
yeah,
some stuff going on,
yeah.
right?
Oh, fair
And which
enough,
he
fair enough.
knew,
Well,
right?
what I
So
always do 100% of the time, what I always do is I will need to spend some time alone with my
yeah,
actual
exactly.
client. And so
But
I often have the children and even the spouses leave the room, leave the conference room, and they wait in our lobby, and we have a one-on-one conversation. The first thing I'm getting a sense of, first of all, you're judging how do they look, how do they feel, are they nervous, are they, you know what I'm saying? But I'm always saying, listen, I want to make it very clear, Mrs. Clifford, I represent you, even though I've spoken to Tim before, even though Tim was here a moment ago. I don't represent Tim. I represent you. Is there anything you want to tell me that you don't want me to tell your son? Because I have a legal obligation to keep that confidential.
yeah,
And so and so the answer sometimes yes, the answer sometimes no. And then the other time where you're really more worried is I go, how many children do you have? I have 3 kids. Well, are you leaving everything to the kids equally, or are you leaving everything to Tim? Because if you're leaving everything to Tim, I'm a little
more
now
nervous. Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. And
So
and
we
that
have
wasn't the case in this one,
exactly,
but this
exactly.
one again, I think he
Yeah,
would have done exactly what you described
yeah, yeah,
had
yeah,
it not been one of those
yeah,
kind of just a bunch of drama happening,
yeah,
right? I mean, again, it's back to you guys have to manage
yeah.
not only the legal part of it, but the drama part of it, right?
Yeah, and listen, by the way, there's no rule that says you have to leave money to your kids equally. You're allowed to disinherit your children, and that's perfectly allowed. But when that happens, especially if they're elderly, what I'm often doing is I'm going to bring in a third-party professional, like a psychologist or a social worker, because I'm going to say, listen, I want it just to protect you and to protect me. We're going to have this independent third party who's going to speak to you separately to make sure that they agree that you're doing this clear-headed.
By your mind, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Because I see the litigation coming, and I'm going to do what you want. You want to disinherit your other kids, I'm going to do that for you. But let's anticipate the litigation that's going to happen and make sure that your wishes are honored and everyone's above reproach. So that's how we're
exactly,
going to handle it.
which again, and Florida, I think is just a little more sensitive to that
Yeah,
because we have
yeah,
so many
for
elderly
sure,
people,
for
right?
sure.
I mean, so I
And
think
elder
that's
abuse is rampant here. So as we really are
right.
we have to be on our game to protect our elderly loved ones from that.
So the second, so kind of that was a good kind of piece. So the second
Yeah.
segment that I'd like to just kind of bring up, which kind of changing the subject
Hmm.
is, and this comes up all the time is, okay, I'm 70 years old and I
Hmm.
have whatever, $500,000. How
Yeah.
do I make sure the state doesn't get my money?
Yeah.
And it's kind of too late to buy long-term care and they
Yeah.
don't have enough to go do something like the
Correct.
money guard, right? So they're like,
That's right.
so that's where I'll also say, first of all, you got to be careful that you don't like overmanage it as a financial advisor, right? So I do
Yeah.
run into lawyers that'll say, well, we're
Yeah.
going to do all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but there's a 1% chance that happens. And then now we don't have access to the assets. We can't
Yeah.
borrow money against them. It's a true balancing act, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and it goes to the individuals. That's why I like to be sometimes part of not influencing the conversation with the attorneys, but helping kind of make sure we're not
Yeah.
over planning is the best way I can describe it.
Well, I work with a lot of financial advisors because of just this situation where, you're often, even more so than me, you're often the first point of contact where someone goes, now mom needs home care. And it turns out that's very expensive.
Right.
And they're going, holy moly, Tim, you've been managing our money. How are we going? This is not sustainable. I mean, we got a couple more years of this left in us, but this is not sustainable if we need much more care. What if we have to move to an assisted living facility or a nursing facility that's $13,000 to $18,000 a month, right? So so essentially that is what at least in my world, differentiates an elder law attorney from an estate planning attorney. So elder law attorneys do estate planning, we do probate, we do guardianship, but in my mind, what makes an elder law attorney different is this focus on Medicaid planning, which is what is one of the solutions to the problem of holy moly, this care is expensive. How am I going to pay for it? Because contrary to popular belief, Medicare, which is what everyone gets when they're 65 or younger if they become disabled, Medicare has a very limited, almost non-existent long-term care benefit.
100
It's going
days.
to
People don't
100 days,
realize.
and that's only in a nursing home. So that's only in
Correct.
a,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I mean, that's 3 months.
correct, exactly. So, and after that, it's done. It does not pay one red cent toward the cost of an assisted living facility. And in home care, it's like it's got to be if you are prescribed skilled care like physical therapy, occupational therapy, then you can also get a very limited amount of unskilled care, like helping go to the bathroom and bathing and preparing meals. But once you lose the skilled care, you don't get the unskilled care anymore for Medicare. So it's very limited and very sort of a short-term basis. So a lot of people go, so what's the solution if you don't have long-term care insurance, if you don't have a couple $1 million in the bank to privately pay for this stuff? Medicaid and then is one of the solutions. And people go, well, listen, Jason, I'm not a Rockefeller, but I have a couple bucks in the bank, so I can't apply for Medicaid. Well, I go, well, that's why you come to someone like me, because we have ways of legally and ethically taking $500,000 is very par for the course. Is taking somewhere between 200 and say $800,000, and we have all these interesting tools that we can utilize to very quickly get you eligible for these really valuable government benefits. You don't have to wait 5 years. You don't have to sell your house. You don't have to go broke first. So those are, I call those crisis cases where they need Medicaid yesterday. If they are working with an intelligent financial advisor like you before they need the care, then we can take advantage of the fact that Medicaid only looks back 5 years and we have irrevocable trust strategy. Essentially, we can get money out of their name in an irrevocable trust where Tim Clifford can still manage it and grow it and make it productive for them. But after 5 years, all that money is invisible. as far as the state is concerned. So it's one of two categories. Do you have 5 years? That's the minority. Most of my clients come to me because they go, we're burning through this money right now. I cannot wait another 5 years. That's the bulk of my business, is I'm helping people protect
And that's the
all
bulk of
that
mine too,
within
by
a
the
few
way.
months. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the bulk of mine. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't, because most people don't have as much money to where they can
Yeah.
put it in an irrevocable trust that then puts
Yes.
all the
Right.
rules around it.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, so it's a really highly niched, specialized area of law that I'm very proud to be, with humility, among the best in my field. I've written a book about it. I'm the incoming president of the Academy of Florida Elder Law Attorneys. I teach other lawyers how to do this stuff. So, I talk about this all the time on my YouTube channel. Like, this is what I spend most of my time doing. We're four lawyers. The other lawyers mostly handle the estate planning stuff. I'm mostly the Medicaid asset protection planning guy for the firm.
So what's the number one? So give me like the 3 steps that like if you were doing one of your YouTube channels instead of being
Yeah.
interviewed, what would
Yeah.
be kind of, okay, I have $500,000 net worth. My wife now needs to get more help.
Hmm.
What would be
Hmm.
kind of, I come prior to meeting with you? I mean, obviously step one is go see
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so kind of don't just stand there and kind of wonder what you should do next. The answer is
Yeah.
go see you. And then the
Yeah.
second is, what would be kind of the second thing, or it's something that you would like to see them do?
This is where the estate planning component becomes really important. So what's interesting is if we have let's take a typical husband and wife, and the example uses the wife now needs care. Does she have a good power of attorney or not? The good news is if she doesn't, but if the healthy spouse still has sort of access to everything, we can probably still do whatever we need to do. But if we only have one spouse, if we only have one person and they don't have a good power of attorney, then we might have to go through a guardianship first before we have to do all this. So the question is, do they have the right documents in place? Do they have their mind? If they have their mind, they can do everything, right? If they don't have their mind, do we have the right documents in place to do all the things that we want to do? Because what I tell people is, first of all, it's not, when someone comes to me and they go, I want to protect my $500,000 and get my wife onto Medicaid. What do? You just throw it in a trust? And the answer is, well, a trust might be part of the plan, but there are lots of different things that we could do. That's why we have these consultations, because there's not one prescription for everybody. And I also am the first to say that everything we do has pros and cons. I do not have a magic solution. Everything I do has a drawback to it, which is why, depending on, is liquidity important or is protecting the money important? Because I have different solutions for those problems, and they both have pros and cons. We're typically layering strategies on top of each other that are going to minimize these drawbacks. So it's really, can the person make decisions for themselves, or do they have the capacity to sign what we need? Or do we have to put something else in place first? And then what we're doing is we're sending them, we have a very detailed intake form, because if you were to refer me a client, say, Jason, I'm sending you a married couple, they have about $500,000 in assets. I go, well, I need a little more information than that. How much of that is in an IRA or a qualified retirement plan? How much of that is just cash? Is any of that annuities? Is any of that life insurance? Because Medicaid looks at all those assets differently. So for example, this is like a really nice thing that's sort of unique to Florida, or just is not available in every state. But in Florida, qualified retirement plans do not count as an asset when determining whether someone is or is not eligible for Medicaid. So
I want to stop you there for 1 second. I want to kind of make sure I'm clear. So in our world, qualified retirement accounts actually have two very defined meanings, right?
Yeah.
So if you go to the actual textbook answer of a qualified retirement account means it's ERISA. It's 401k, it's 403b, et cetera. IRA is not technically a qualified retirement account. It is. I mean, in the textbook sense, right?
Okay.
In the word that you're talking is an IRA, like the state look at an IRA as qualified retirement account.
It is. Yes, the state of Florida looks at an IRA, traditional IRA, Roth IRA, 401k, 403b, SEP, all that stuff. Yeah, anything that's the IRS recognizes it as a retirement account. It's not your stock portfolio that you've just sort of earmarked as, I'm saving this for retirement, right? It's got to be in the form of like an IRA.
It's a retirement account of some sort. And
correct,
qualified,
exactly.
I'm not trying to be picky. I'm just trying to point
it's okay.
out
It's good.
that periodically people will use that word, but there is a difference sometimes. And so
if it's an annuity, is it an IRA that has been annuitized, or is it just a standard annuity? Right? That makes a difference.
Okay.
So if it is one of these, what the state of Florida considers to be a qualified retirement account, as long as it's paying out, whether the distributions are required or not. So even a Roth IRA that doesn't have required distributions, we will make it start distributing money, because then the big asset is invisible as far as eligibility is concerned. Now the income count, and so if people come to me, the ideal situation is I got 800 grand in my IRA and I got nothing in savings. I go, great, you're in, right? We have nothing really to do to get you. I mean, the income that's distributed, we may have to utilize an income trust for that, but just for the distributions. But excess income is a much easier hurdle to overcome than excess countable assets.
So even if they just take $100 a month, that's
We typically do something this is very similar to what would normally be the RMD, even if they're not subject to an RMD. So it may be a little bit
just so it doesn't look like you're playing games.
Correct, exactly. But then they're good. So understanding that, and then there are different types of life insurance policies. Some of them count, some of them don't. What do we do? So we have these tools of dealing with these different assets depending on how they're structured. By the way, just to give you a little, this might be too in the weeds, to give you a little more nuance, sometimes we are cashing out of an IRA, even though we don't have to, because if they're in a nursing facility, all of your income from all sources combined, including IRA distributions, has to be paid to the facility. So maybe we want to get rid of that. Maybe we want to minimize what we have to pay on a monthly basis and maximize what the state pays. Right. So sometimes we keep the IRA, sometimes we're cashing out. So there's all these little nuances depending on, that's why everybody's different. I don't have one prescription for everybody.
But to summarize, and I just want to kind of keep, that's why we started this call. So anyone listening to this call, we started this call with the importance of starting with a plan, because if you notice kind of, do you have the right documents in place and do they have their mind? Then sitting down and kind of, okay, then what are the assets? And the reason that I used $500,000, I want to kind of touch on that, is that's the group that I have that comes to me most of the time. The client with $5 million,
correct.
They've already kind of done something.
And they can privately pay.
Exactly. So I just want everyone to kind of, that are listening to this call, a lot of times there are two groups, but the group with the 500,000 to $1 million, they're the most concerned about this.
Correct.
And then what about payback at the end of all this? So all of a sudden I go in, I have a $300,000 nursing home bill. It's all in my IRA. Are they going to take my IRA?
Nope. We are going to, Florida has not, there are some states that have expanded Medicaid estate recovery, which means they're more aggressive. Florida is not one of those states.
Oh, awesome.
So this is where the estate planning comes in. As long as we can avoid probate, we can avoid Medicaid estate recovery in most circumstances. There are certain tools that we are sometimes using as part of our plan. It usually won't be the entire plan, but those tools necessitate a small portion being subject to Medicaid payback. But for the most part, we're protecting 80 to 90% of our clients' assets, and that will never have to be paid back to Medicaid.
And then husband, wife, managing that part is one strategy.
Yep.
If it's the second, if the first one's passed away, husband or wife, and now it's just the kids trying to manage it, that becomes another totally different strategy, right?
Correct.
I mean, and a whole nother area of
for sure
kind of getting everyone on the same page and understanding, what we can do and can't do, right?
Yes, sir. You got it. There are some typical cases, but really everybody is a little bit unique because of it's not just what do we do with $500,000. It's what's the family dynamic look like? Is there a spouse that we have to provide for? Is there a special needs child that we have to provide for? Is that, what are our goals? Is liquidity important? Is liquidity not as important? And we have all these different tools depending on the family dynamic that allow us, I can get anybody onto Medicaid. I get anybody onto Medicaid. It's just a matter of, does the family dynamic lend itself to making this a worthwhile endeavor? And if you need care at home, if you need care in an assisted living facility or nursing facility, it is 99% of the time going to be in my client and the family's financial interest to engage in Medicaid planning, because what we're doing is essentially, first of all, I like to point out Medicaid's not perfect either. In other words, Medicaid doesn't necessarily cover everything that my client needs to safely remain at home or to afford their assisted living facility or nursing facility. It's going to be very helpful. So if we can get to people before they run out of money, and segregate this money in a way that's going to make it available so they can stay where they pay for what they need to pay for. That's going to improve, not only is it going to improve the quality of their life, but it's going to have the side effect of making it more likely that there'll be something to pass on to their heirs.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to just keep it going because you're hitting on some stuff. So I know that people say, oh, you interrupt, but I want to kind of touch on it. But the other thing that I want to point out to people is someone going on Medicaid, and I actually had this come up with my mom. So I'm not even like saying I read this in a book, is when I wanted to pick what facility I wanted her to go into, right? So I had I want her to go into a facility close to me. I want her to go into a facility I like the people in,
Yeah.
Those facilities have really strict rules on who they'll accept. And a lot of times they have to pay for the first 3 months, right? So I had to show that I had enough money, depending on what facility it was. So like people will come and say, hey, my mom is now run out of money and I want to put her in this facility. And I'm like, it's too late. You needed to do it 3 months ago when you still could have paid something to get them into that facility.
Well, so that's kind of like this kind of game that's played. So here's what the game is. So this is so first of all, a little bit of context. If you're looking at an assisted living facility, which is a lower level of care than a skilled nursing facility or a nursing home, the assisted living facility either accepts Medicaid or they don't accept Medicaid. Okay. In other words, they're playing nice facilities that do, but some of them just won't, and Medicaid will just never pay for that facility. When we're talking about the highest level of care, which is a nursing facility, they all have to accept Medicaid, 100% of them, from the best to the worst. So first, the first myth is that we want to get people beyond is if I go on Medicaid, I'm relegated to this lower level nursing facility. The answer is no, they're all Medicaid nursing facilities. But what your point is bringing up is the nicer facilities have less availability. And to get into the facility of your choice, sometimes you play this game where they go, listen, we understand that you're going to be on Medicaid eventually, but we have plenty of people who are going to privately pay. We don't have to deal with Medicaid, and we prefer those people. So the issue is, can you get into the facility? And if you can get in, you can privately pay for 1 month, 2 months. Then what happens is it's illegal for them to kick you out because the method of payment is changing.
So that's what I was running into.
Exactly. So what they'll do is, listen, they'll go, so you don't want to pull a fast one over them because this is where your loved one's going to be receiving care.
Yeah,
so they'll go, listen, we want you to get on Medicaid eventually. They'll go, listen, pay for 2-3 months and then switch to Medicaid and then there'll be no problem.
But they were very upfront about it. They did not.
Yeah, it's technically inappropriate for them to do that. They're not supposed to do that. But
and they probably, when I say up front, they were more. Again, I'm a financial advisor, I read signs a little better than most. So again,
no, it's a common game that these facilities are playing. It's just they're not supposed to discriminate based on method of payment, but and once you're in, they can't. Once you're in, you're in. But can you get past the front door? And they'll make you privately pay sometimes to get in the front door.
That is so interesting. Yeah. So that does answer kind of my, because I did kind of bump into that.
Sure.
So then to kind of finish up, because I know I only have another 15 minutes with you. So I want to, because that's why I kind of, because you're so good at kind of helping people understand this. So what happens is we touched on they have to have a plan and kind of be clear. And then kind of what are the first 3 or 4 things, and you can protect stuff in Medicare and you can have a strategy. The one thing that I'm finding interesting is Florida's a really good place to age, isn't it? I mean, because of some of our laws. I mean, so if I have a parent up north, bringing them down to Florida, it does have some benefits. You'd obviously want to do some comparing and contrasting, but Florida does sound like a pretty good place to age in place.
It's interesting in terms of what's interesting about Florida is among the states that I've been exposed to, Florida has more planning opportunities. In other words, it's easier for someone here's the simplest example. In a place like New York, your primary residence counts as an asset. So you got to sell the house, or you got to plan 5 years in advance, or you're not getting Medicaid. Whereas in Florida, right off the bat, if someone's moving to Florida with $700,000, and if they can live at home, I'm going to go buy a homestead, because immediately, buy a $500,000 homestead, is immediately that's protected, because Florida doesn't count your homestead as an asset. Now we're just protecting another $200,000, that's a piece of cake for me, right? So there's planning opportunities in Florida, and that's not the only example. That's just a common
Yeah,
one
no,
that
exactly.
we don't have in other states. But I'll give you, there's, for example, in Florida, you're only allowed to have $2,000 in what is considered countable assets. In New York, you can have $30,000. So there's a give and a take kind of,
Yeah.
but Florida is very generous when it comes to the planning tools that are available to protect a significant amount of assets in a short period of time compared to other states.
So yeah, again, you can't almost just blanketly say it's
Yeah.
good. But the one thing that I want to kind of reiterate, and anyone listen to this, I want to kind of really, really take this seriously. I can't tell you how many times I sit down with a client who'll say they're very educated, they're very
Mm-hmm.
knowledgeable, they listen to, the talking heads on the radio, they listen to, they really can talk the language.
Yeah.
And so they think they have a plan, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
going to be me sitting down with them, and one of the spouses
Yeah.
wants someone else involved, and the other one's sitting there like, you're not going to give me anything extra. And I
Right.
can tell you, I rarely get 15 minutes into the conversation where they don't have it right. That
Yeah.
they're special. It goes to people. Generalization in
Yeah.
planning is not a strategy.
Well, it's like when people go to Google to diagnose their medical condition. It's like maybe you're maybe you're getting some good information, maybe not. We don't really know. So you're like kind of half in, half out.
And
Same
well,
thing
it
with
might
legal
help you
stuff.
with questions, right? So,
Yeah,
so
right,
I'm a big
exactly.
AI person. It might
Yeah,
help
yeah,
you with what
sure.
questions to ask you or me, right? So
Yeah,
I'm like totally good with them using AI
correct.
before the meeting because they come a little more knowledgeable and they come with maybe a little
Yeah,
better questions.
yep,
But it still needs to be customized. People just need to
yeah,
understand. That's where the expertise. And people think I'm covered, but there's actually just
mhm,
one little nuance in their life that other people don't have.
yeah, yeah,
And when people like us talk on stuff like this, we're always talking generalization. So if you're listening to the radio about financial advice or estate planning, et cetera, that person 100% of the time is just still generalizing.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's your if you have your everyone's unique and everybody has their own wishes and goals and their different relationships with spouses. Is it the first marriage where they share the kids, or do they have kids from prior relationships? There's all sorts of things
Weirdness.
that
Yeah.
it's gonna change how we ultimately advise them. You
And it
and me.
just comes down to drama, right? I mean, how
Yeah.
much drama do you have in your life? And,
Right.
I mean, it's just kind of so,
Yeah.
all right. Well, at the end, so how do people get a hold of you? I can't tell you how much I appreciate this conversation. It was very
I'm
enjoyable.
thrilled that you invited me. And listen, I hope it comes across. I really do genuinely enjoy talking about this stuff. That's why I give a lot of lectures, and I love spreading the gospel, as I call it. Because there's a lot of bad information when it comes to estate planning and Medicaid planning. So I'm trying to get good information out there. So listen, there's a number. If you still want more good, high quality, free information, I have a highly productive YouTube channel and website, which is just Elder Needs Law. It's at Elder Needs Law on YouTube or elderneedslaw.com. And I write articles and I answer people's very specific questions. And there's no expectation for you to call me, and it's not me just doing a sales piece. I'm answering people's real questions. If you are interested in a consultation, you can fill out a form on the website or call. Our general number is 786-756-8169, 786-756-8169. That's statewide. That's, we can meet people. We have our 4 offices: Plantation, Boca, Aventura, or Spring Hill. And then, of course, over Zoom if you don't want to fight traffic or if you're not near any of those locations.
That's fantastic. And even if you're not really near one of those locations, there's one that's relatively close, meaning a short day trip.
Yeah.
And it's once you do it one time, Zoom becomes really a
Yeah.
productive way to
And
stay in contact.
the
I
reality is
mean,
it's very easy to do this stuff virtually. If you have an email address, we can get this stuff done. We can even arrange for mobile notaries to come to you to get things signed. It's a very, very easy. I have a solid 30% of my clients will never meet me in person. We just meet like this with me and my staff. And I also like to say with humility, it's not just me. I have 3 other attorneys who work with me, and we have 8 or 9 other support staff. I have a phenomenal support staff that really helps me do what I do. And I can't sing their praises enough because the team that I've surrounded myself with is just phenomenal.
that's fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jason. That was wonderful. And I really enjoyed the conversation.
Tim, such a pleasure to be here.